أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. روى جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليها السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال السلام عليك يا فاطمة وقلت عليك السلام يا أبتاه يا رسول الله. قال إني وجدت في بدني ضعفا فقلت له أعوذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطين به فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به وصرت أنظر عليه وإذا وجهه يطلع له كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكما عليه وما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أمّا وقلت عليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وسمرة فؤادي. فقال لي يا أمّا إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. وقلت نعم إن جدك أتى الكساء. فأقبل الحسن عليه السلام نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جدا يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أكون معك تحت الكساء. قال له وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أمّا وقلت عليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وسمرة فؤادي. فقال لي يا أمّا إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسين عليه السلام نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جدا يا من اختار الله وتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء. قال له وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فعند ذلك بالحسن علي بن أبي طالب قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا فاطمة. فقلت وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن أمي رسول الله. فقلت نعم ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. وأقبل علي عليه السلام نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء. قال له وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسي وخليفتي وصاحب لواي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهم تحت الكساء. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. ثم أتيتنا والكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء. قال ما عليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بدأتي قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرف الكساء وأومى بيد اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وهامتي لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي يؤلمني ما يؤلمه ويحزنني ما يحزنهم أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم عدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم إنهم مني وأنا منهم فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم واذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد قال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدهية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبته هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال جبريل أمين يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ وقال الله عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة هم فاطمة وأبوها وبالها وبنوها صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد. فقال جبريل عليه السلام يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أحبط إلى الأرض ما ليكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فحبط الأمين جبريل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله لا يكرك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت السماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدهية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلقا يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلقا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فلتأذن لي يا رسول الله. فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وهي أنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبريل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى عليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. فقال علي عليه السلام لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من فضل الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني برسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا ذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله ثانيا يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني برسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وأخذ الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة صلوات. اللهم صل على اللهم بحق محمد أنت المحمود اللهم بحق علي أنت الأعلى اللهم بحق فاطمة الزهراء أنت فاطر السماوات والأرض اللهم بحق الحسن أنت المحسن اللهم بحق الحسين أنت قديم الإحسان يا قاضي الحاجات اقض حاجات المؤمنين والمؤمنات يا شافي الأمراض اشف مرضان المؤمنين والمؤمنات يا شافي الأمراض اشف مرضان المؤمنين والمؤمنات المخصوصين يا رازق زيادة في الرزق بركة في الرزق صحة في الجسم توبة قبل الموت مغفرة بعد الموت نجاة من النار دخولا في الجنة عافية في الدنيا والآخرة إنك على كل شيء قدير الصلوات رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة إلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللہم ہم کو ہے اپنی جان سے پیارا غم حسین ہم کو ہے اپنی جان سے پیارا غم حسین قائم رہے جہاں میں خدایا غم حسین ہم کو ہے اپنی جان سے پیارا غم حسین روزے اعلیٰ سے پوچھا گیا کیا پسند ہے روزے اعلیٰ سے پوچھا گیا کیا پسند ہے بے اختیار ہم نے پکارا غم حسین ہم کو ہے اپنی جان سے پیارا غم حسین جب چاہا سیدہ کے قدم آئے گھر میرے جب چاہا سیدہ کے قدم آئے گھر میرے جب چاہا سیدہ کے قدم آئے گھر میرے فرش عذاب بچھا کے منایا غم حسین فرش عذاب بچھا کے منایا غم حسین کم ظرف کو جہاں میں ملا جب بھی اقتدار کم ظرف کو جہاں میں ملا جب بھی اقتدار پہلے بنا ستم کا نشانہ غم حسین قائم رہے جہاں میں خدایا غم حسین ہر کفر و ظلم جور و تشدد کے سامنے ہر کفر و ظلم و جور و تشدد کے سامنے ہے آج بھی محاذ پہ تنہا غم حسین قائم رہے جہاں میں خدایا غم حسین پیش خدا کھڑا تھا میں شرمندہ سر جھکائے پیش خدا کھڑا تھا میں شرمندہ سر جھکائے، کام ایسے آئے وقت میں آیا غم حسین، ہم کو ہے اپنی جان سے پیارا غم حسین، قائم رہے جہاں میں خدایا غم حسین۔ صلوات۔
اور محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ بلبل کو گل پسند، گلوں کو ہوا پسند، بلبل کو گل پسند، گلوں کو ہوا پسند، ہم بوترابیوں کو ہے خاک شفا پسند، یہ اپنی اپنی وضع ہے ایسا کنان دوست، یہ اپنی اپنی وضع ہے ایسا کنان دوست، تم کو ارم پسند ہمیں کربلا پسند، بلبل کو گل پسند۔ صلوات۔ باقر کے لاڈلے کا تابوت اٹھا ہے، باقر کے لاڈلے کا تابوت اٹھا ہے، بتلاؤ مسلمانوں کیا اس کی خطا ہے، بتلاؤ مسلمانوں کیا اس کی خطا ہے، باقر کے لاڈلے کا تابوت اٹھا ہے، بتلاؤ مسلمانوں کیا اس کی خطا ہے، قربا سے مودت کی یہ تفسیر ہے کیسی، لکھی ہے تم نے ظلم کی تحریر یہ کیسی، لکھی ہے تم نے ظلم کی یہ تحریر یہ کیسی، کیا خوب دیا تم نے رسالت کا صلہ ہے، بتلاؤ مسلمانوں کیا اس کی خطا ہے، باقر کے لاڈلے کا تابوت اٹھا ہے، بتلاؤ مسلمانوں کیا اس کی خطا ہے، پروان محمد کو ہے کیوں تم نے بھلایا، کیوں احمد مرسل کو ہے تم نے رلایا، کیوں احمد مرسل کو ہے تم نے رلایا، کہ تم نے محمد سے یہ کیسی وفا ہے، بتلاؤ مسلمانوں کیا اس کی خطا ہے، کاظم کی یتیمی پہ روتے ہیں دو جہاں، مسموم کی میت پہ زہرا کی ہے فغاں، مسموم کی میت پہ زہرا کی ہے فغاں، ہر سو دہر میں ماتم جعفر کی صدا ہے، بتلاؤ مسلمانوں کیا اس کی خطا ہے؟ اے کلمہ گو خدا کا کچھ خوف تو کرو، نہ ڈھاؤ ستم اس پہ ایسے ستم کرو، نہ ڈھاؤ ستم اس پہ ایسے ستم کرو، تربت سے محمد کی یہ آئی صدا ہے، بتلاؤ مسلمانوں کیا اس کی خطا ہے؟ بولو خاموش کیوں ہو قرآن کے قاریوں، بولو خاموش کیوں ہو قرآن کے قاریوں، اس بات کا خورشید کو اللہ جواب دو، اس بات کا خورشید کو للہ جواب دو، کس جرم میں معصوم کو ہائے زہر دیا ہے، بتلاؤ مسلمانوں کیا اس کی خطا ہے؟ باقر کے لاڈلے کا تابوت اٹھا ہے، بتلاؤ مسلمانوں کیا اس کی خطا ہے؟ صلوات سورہ فاتحہ۔ ایک سورہ فاتحہ تمام مرحومین کے لیے۔ بسم اللہ۔ بارہ دیگر سلوات آجا جب مرسی مرسی قول صادق ہے سنے دل سے غلامان حسین، قول صادق ہے سنے دل سے غلامان حسین، جو بھی غم میں میرے دادا کے کرے شیون شب، یا رلانے کو پڑے حال امام کون، یا صورت سے یہ اظہار کے دل ہے بے چپ، یا صورت سے یہ اظہار کے دل ہے بے چپ، اجر عرفان امام یقین بخش، میرے لانا اسے فردوس بری بخشیں گے، میرے لانا اسے فردوس بری بخشیں گے، اس روایت کا محبوں میں ہوا جب چرچا، جا بجا ہونے لگی مجلس شبیر، اپنی کفشوں کو جہاں چھوڑتے تھے اہل، بیٹھ جاتے تھے وہاں چوک سے آ کر مول، بیٹھ جاتے تھے وہاں چپکے سے آ کر مولا بارہا دیکھے گئے بزم میں غمخواروں صاف کرتے ہوئے نالین عزاداروں صاف کرتے ہوئے نالین عزاداروں کے ان مجالس کے جو منصور کے پہنچے اخبار جذبہ قاتل شہ پاک ہوا جب اگر آپ تھے ایک حجرے میں اور چند آگ لگوا دی وہاں چاروں طرف سے آگ لگوا دے وہاں چاروں طرف سے ایک بار پڑ گیا گل پسر صاحب معراج ہائے گھر پاتے مکہ تیسری بار آج جلا ہائے گھر پاتے مکہ تیسری بار آج جلا آگ بجھانے کی حاکم نے خبر جب کہ سنی مشتعل آتش بغدار ہوئی شے کو انگورے ستم آلود کے ڈالے چند دانے جو کیے نوش قیامت چند دانے جو کیے نوش قیامت خون کے ساتھ رگوں میں صفت سیل گیا کل بدل میں اثر غیر دغا پھیل گیا کل بدل میں اثر غیر دغا پھیل گیا سب عزیزوں کو کیا بہر وصیت جو طلب نزع کا وقت تھا منہ دیکھ رونے لگے شہ نے فرمایا کہ ہم خلق سے جانے کو ہے تم کو ملحوظ رہتا خالق تم کو ملحوظ رہتا غالب کا عزم بس یہی سب کے معاون سر میں شر ہوگی یہ قضا کی تو شفاعت نہ میسر ہوگی یہ قضا کی تو شفاعت نہ میسر ہوگی دوسرے یہ کہ رہے یاد میرے جب کی غم شبیر میں جی کھول کے روتے رہے دیکھ کر موسوی کاظم کی طرف یہ الفراق ہے میرے دلدار خدا کو الفراق ہے میرے دلدار خدا کو لو بطول آئی رسول ثقلین پہنچے وہ علی آئے وہ شبر وہ حسین پہنچے وہ علی آئے وہ شبر وہ حسین پہنچے السلام ہے میرے نانا میرے دادا میں فدا السلام ہے میری دادی جگر خیر ور السلام ہے ہدف غم حسن سابق السلام ہے شہ مظلوم غریب الغرب السلام شاہ مظلوم غریب الغرب کہہ کے یہ اٹھ گئے دنیا سے ہمارے جعفر ہائے شبیر کہا صدارے جعفر ہائے شبیر کہا صدائے جعفر فاطمہ رو کے پکاری میرے پیارے بیٹے بات بھی کرنے نہ پائے کہ صدارے بیٹے تھا میرے لال کا غم دل سے تمہارے بیٹے مجلس ہوگی باپا کس کے سہارے بیٹے مجلس ہوگی باپا کس کے سہارے بیٹے لوگش آتا ہے سنبھالو مجھے سونے والے الوداع ہے میرے مظلوم کے رونے والے الوداع ہے میرے مظلوم کے رونے والے قول صادق ہے
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم الحمد للہ الذی لا یبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا یوسی نامہ العدون ولا یؤدی حقہ المجتہدون الذی لا یدرکہ بہد الہمم ولا ینالہ غوث الفتن الذی لیس لصفتہ حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت محدود ولا اجل ممدود فطر الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالسخر ميدان عرض ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيبنا وحبيب رب العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعن على أدائهم أجمعين من أول يوم ظلمهم إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد. Dear brothers and sisters that are listening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, Imam Jafar Sadiq a.s, this is a personality who we as Shias, we haven't understood. This is a personality we as Muslims, we have not understood. We have not taken into account the knowledge that this holy Imam of ours gave us. Not just as Muslims, but as Shias also. Imam Sadiq a.s, as you all remember, in history, we have two narrations when it comes to the Shahadat of Imam Sadiq a.s. One is the 15th of Shawal, the second is the 25th of Shawal. And the 15th of Shawal already passed, and tonight is the second narration that says that Imam Sadiq a.s., he was martyred on this night. So because this is the night that we are going to commemorate Imam Sadiq a.s., I want to talk about what Imam Sadiq a.s. gave not just to Muslims, but what Imam Sadiq a.s. gave to humanity. Because when we talk about all the Imams, When we talk about Imam Ali alayhi salam, we talk about his miracles. When we talk about Imam Hussein alayhi salam, we speak about his shahadat. When we talk about Imam Hassan alayhi salam, what do we talk about? Imam Hassan, what do we talk about when people talk about Imam Hassan? What? Can you name one specific thing that they talk about? Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, they talk about his ibadat. Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, they talk about the knowledge. Imam Jafar Sadiq a.s, they talk about the knowledge. But even when the knowledge is spoken about, it goes through one ear, goes out the other. Imam Hassan a.s, I asked, what is it that the lecturers talk about when it comes to Imam Hassan a.s? Some people said his shahadat. His shahadat. But is that the only thing that Imam Hassan a.s. is known for? Is Imam Hussein a.s. only known for shahadat? That we should just recognize Imam Hussein only and only through his shahadat? No. This isn't the reason that the Imams alayhim salam, they were sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It wasn't so that we recognize them only through their shahadat. No. It was so that we recognize them as the representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the companions of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, they came to him and they asked him, Yabna Rasulullah, how do we know if the person that's claiming to be Imam is really an Imam? How do we know? Imam alayhi salam, he says, if the person that's claiming to be Imam can do what I'm going to do, then you can believe that he truly is an Imam sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the man, he says, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, what is it? The Imam, he puts his hand against the wall and the wall turns gold. The wall, it turns to gold. The Imam, he says, if the person claiming Imamat can do this, then know that this person is truly a representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's an Imam sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning what? If the person that is claiming to be Imam can perform miracles such as these, then know that this is an Imam. If they can't perform these types of miracles, know that they're liars. And you have so many people within history who took on the title of Imam. There were people that were given that title of Imam by force, and there were some people that took on that title of Imam by force. What do I mean? Muhammad Hanafiya, the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he was forcefully given that title of Imam. He was forcefully given that title of Imam. He didn't take it for himself. He was given that title of Imam from his followers. And then you have who? In history you have Jafar Kazzab. He took that title of Imam to himself. Jafar Kazzab was who? One of the brothers of Imam Hassan Askari alayhi salam. The reason that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is known as Sadiq, do you all know? The Holy Prophet, he had told Amir al-Mu'mineen that after you, Hassan and Hussein, after Hussein, his son will be named Ali Zainul Abidin. After him, his son will be named Muhammad al-Baqir. After him, his son will be named Jafar, and give him the title of Sadiq. Why? Because in that same line, in that same lineage, there will come a time when there will be another person named Jafar, and he will falsely claim Imamat. He will falsely claim Imamat. To differentiate between the two Jafars in the same line, this will be known as Jafar Al Sadiq, that will be known as Jafar Kazzab. The verse that I started this lecture off with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says what? Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, O you who believe. This is something for everyone to think about. Wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, O you who believe. O you who believe. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have taqwa in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not just have taqwa in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but be with those who are truthful. Be with those who are truthful. In history, Islamic history, Sadiq al-Amin, who was known as Sadiq al-Amin? The Holy Prophet, mashallah, alhamdulillah. It took a while, but alhamdulillah. Sadiq al-Amin, this title of Sadiq al-Amin, was given to the Holy Prophet. Who else was also known by this title? Imam Jafar Sadiq a.s. also held both of these titles. Sadiq al-Amin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, O you who believe, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be with the Sadiqeen. Be with the truthful. So when it comes to Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam, when we hold on to Imam Sadiq al-Islam, we're holding on to this verse of the Quran that tells us, that commands us to be with the Sadiqeen. There's no one that was more truthful in his time than Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam. No one. To the point where Malik ibn Anas, who's the Imam of the Maliki school of thought, he was a student of Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam. Abu Hanifa, he's a student of Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam. We'll talk about him in a bit. But Abu Hanifa, he's a student of Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam. Malik ibn Anas, he himself, he talks about how much respect he gave to Imam Sadiq al-Islam, and in return, how much respect Imam gave to him. How much respect. He himself, he used to say that whenever I used to go into the company of Imam Sadiq al-Islam, he used to welcome me with open arms. He used to welcome me with open arms. There was a time when I went to Hajj with Imam Sadiq al-Islam. And that time, when we got closer and it was time for Hajj, we were facing the Kaaba. The Imam, he's not able to say labbaik. He's not able to say labbaik. When I asked him, Yabna Rasulullah, you don't need to force yourself. Just all you need to do is as much as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked for you to do, that's it. Imam, he looks at him and he says, how can I say labbaik? With what tongue should I say labbaik? If from the other side the answer is that you're not ready. If I say labbaik, I'm here. And from the other side, the response is what? You're not here. I'm afraid of that. What is the Imam? Is the Imam saying this for himself, or is the Imam saying this so that Malik ibn Anas could understand something, so that he could learn something? Would the response from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be for Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam that you're not ready? This labbaik that you're saying is a lie? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this title of Sadiq to Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, if tomorrow Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is to say labbaik ya Allah, and the response is no, it's ya Sadiq, you're a liar, is that possible? No, it's not. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself gave that title to Imam alayhi salam. So what is the Imam doing? He's trying to teach Malik ibn Anas how he should come in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How he should salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This holy Imam, he gave so much, not just to Islam, but he gave so much to humanity in the form of what we today know as science. When it came to biology, the Imam, he's teaching the people, he's telling the people of their time about biology, but do they understand? No, they don't understand. When it comes to astronomy, the Imam is teaching the people of his time about astronomy. Do they understand? No, they don't understand. The Imam, he's teaching the people of his time about physics. Do they understand? No, they don't understand. He's teaching the people about chemistry. Do they understand? They don't understand. He's teaching people about the theory of light. Do they understand? No, they don't understand. Everything is just going above their heads. That's it. Today, when we read what Imam Sadiq alayhi salam talked about, what he said about when it came to regarding the theory of light, we see that Galileo used what Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said to make his telescope. Today, when we read about the theory of light, or when we read about physics and how this universe is constantly expanding, we see that it was from Imam Sadiq a.s. And you can argue that Imam, he got this from the Quran. That's absolutely true. When today we find out that there are suns, there are stars that are brighter than the sun that we see, you go back and read the history of Imam Sadiq a.s. and you see that Imam Sadiq a.s. already talked about that. He talked about all of this. Yet, we as Shias, we don't know about this. Awam al-Nas, they don't know about this. And the sad part is, when our Imam has already told us this, when we're in class, for example, and the teacher, the professor is talking to us and saying that Galileo was the one who came up with making the telescope. He had the idea of making the telescope. Because we don't know, Imam Jafar Sadiq a.s. said this 800, 900 years before Galileo, we stay quiet. Because we don't know that Imam Jafar Sadiq a.s., he talked about cells within the body 800, 900 years before we figured it out, we stay quiet. Because we don't know Imam Jafar Sadiq a.s. talked about the water cycle, we stay quiet. But the reality is, the Imam, he talked about all of this before the people that were given credit for this stuff even came into existence. Imam Sadiq a.s., he used to be in his father's lectures from the age of 3. From the age of 3. He used to be in the lectures of who? The person that was known as Baqir al-Ulum. He was used to be in the lectures of that person who's known to split open knowledge. To such an extent, when the Khalifa, he was coming to Medina, at that time, Medina, the Masjid al-Nabawi was being expanded. When it was being expanded, the Khalifa, he was coming from Sham, and he had told his wazir in Medina that he's going to come. And when he comes, he sees that there's so many people in Masjid al-Nabawi, and Imam Muhammad Baqir al-Islam, he's giving a lecture. And amongst them, he sees Imam Sadiq al-Islam. But Imam Sadiq al-Islam, he's only 3 years old. 3 years old. And he asks his wazir, this 3-year-old boy, who is he? And the wazir, or the representative of Medina, he says to him that this 3-year-old boy, he's Jafar ibn Muhammad. He's Jafar ibn Muhammad. And he goes, Jafar ibn Muhammad who? He goes, the one who's giving the lecture. And the Khalifa, he says, does he understand anything that is being said? A 3-year-old, does he understand anything that is being said? The representative, he looks at the Khalifa and he goes, he understands better than anyone that is in this lecture hall. He understands better. The narrations state that when other people could not understand what the Imam was talking about, they used to ask Imam Sadiq a.s. to explain it to them. They used to ask a 3-year-old to explain to them what Imam Muhammad Baqir al-Islam is talking about. And what would Imam Muhammad Baqir al-Islam talk about? He talked about philosophy. He talked about astronomy. He talked about science. He talked about all of this. What does that tell you? All of those people that were in the lecture of Imam Muhammad Baqir al-Islam, their mental capacity was what? Not even greater than the mental capacity of the 3-year-old of Ala Muhammad alayhi salam. The Khalifa, he comes, when he sees Imam Sadiq a.s. in that lecture, he calls him over and he asks him what your name is. And Imam Sadiq a.s., he tells him, my name is Jafar. And that's my father. And then he asks Imam Sadiq a.s. 3 questions. After that, he didn't know what to ask. The first question he asked Imam Sadiq a.s, a 3-year-old, he asked him, can you tell me who is known as the father of logic? Who's known as the founder or the father of logic? And Imam a.s. at the age of 3, without even hesitating, he says that Aristotle was known as the father of logic. Aristotle was given that name or given that title by his students. The founder of logic, the father of logic. 3-year-old. Then the Khalifa, he asked him another question. He goes, do you know what Ma'az is? And Imam, he looks at him, he says, Ma'az is not a person. Ma'az is a collection of stars in a specific constellation. Ma'az is a cluster of stars in a specific constellation. Now the Khalifa, he's stunned. Why? Because this is a 3-year-old. When he asks him questions about general knowledge, he gives him an answer. When he asks him questions about astronomy, he gives him an answer. So he thinks, and he says to him, do you know who Sahib al-Sawaq is? Imam, without hesitating, he says, Sahib al-Sawaq, this title was given to one of the companions of the Holy Prophet. This title was given to Abdullah ibn Masud. A 3-year-old knows history. A 3-year-old knows astronomy. A 3-year-old knows general knowledge that a 40 or 45-year-old should know. That a 40 or 45-year-old should know. How did this knowledge come to this 3-year-old? At the age of 3, the Imam is teaching the students of Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam. He's explaining to them. At the age of 6 is the first time that the narrations state that at the age of 5 or the age of 6, that's when Imam Sadiq alayhi salam met who? The Imam of the Sunni school of thought, Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa was learning from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam through 2 years. 2 years. Sorry, Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam met Abu Hanifa at the age of 6. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he taught Abu Hanifa for 2 years. Abu Hanifa was the one who said that if it wasn't for those 2 years, no man would have perished. His name was Noman. And he says, if it wasn't for those 2 years that he learned under Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that if it wasn't for those 2 years, I would have perished. And this saying, if it wasn't for Fulan person, I would have perished, you see that Umar ibn Khattab said the same thing. People that had no reason, or people that did not know anything about Islamic fiqh or Islam itself, they used to say this about these personalities of Ahl Bayt alayhi salam. If it wasn't for these personalities, we would perish. If it wasn't for them. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, the knowledge that he was able to give, he was able to give that knowledge. Why? Because of the fighting that was happening over government at that time. In the time of Imam Baqir alayhi salam, in the time of Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, the Banu Umayyah and Banu Abbas, they were fighting over government. And because they were fighting over the government, the Imams, they had time to spread Islam the way it needed to be spread. What do I mean? Islam was never meant to be spread by the sword. It was never meant to be spread by the sword. Islam is the religion that Hazrat Adam alayhi salam brought. The religion that Hazrat Adam alayhi salam brought. It was never meant to be spread by the sword. The Holy Prophet, when he was in Mecca, did he spread it by the sword? No, he did not. What did he spread it by? Ilm. The Holy Prophet, he spread Islam from Mecca through ilm. When he came to Medina, he did his best to spread Islam through ilm. Yes, when he needed to rise up, he rose up. But that rising up wasn't to forcefully convert people to Islam. When he took over Mecca, what does he do? Did he put the sword on people's neck and he tell them, if you don't accept Islam, I will kill you? No, he didn't do that. The Holy Prophet, he gave them options. He gave them options. You can choose whichever one of those options you want. Did he say that you have to become Muslim or I will kill you? No, he didn't. One of the options was what? You just lay down your weapons. You lay down your weapons, we won't fight. Another option was what? You become Muslim, we won't fight. A third option was what? You take refuge in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we won't fight. A fourth option was what? You take refuge in Abu Sufyan's house, we won't fight. 3 out of those 4 options, the Holy Prophet doesn't even mention you accept Islam. Just one of them. 3 out of the 4 options. Just one of those 4 options, the Holy Prophet says, if you accept Islam, we won't fight. The other 3, he doesn't even mention accepting Islam. He just says, you take refuge in one of these areas, we won't fight you. That was it. So the objective of the Holy Prophet was to spread Islam not through fear, but through knowledge. That was his objective. When it came to Imam Baqir Islam, when it came to Imam Jafar Sadiq Islam, they adhered to that objective. And they spread Islam through their knowledge. It was because of that knowledge that the Khalifas of that time, they feared the Imams. Because of that knowledge. Why? When you have 10,000 people who are attending your lecture, when you have 20,000 people attending your lecture, the ruler of that time, there are going to be 20,000 people are attending this man's lecture. Why is he so important? Why is he so important? What is he saying that he's become this important that he has 20,000 people listening to every word that he says? And this is what happened. 10,000 people, 20,000 people listening to the words of who? Imam Baqir Islam, Imam Jafar Sadiq Islam. And because of this, both of these Imams, they were put under house arrest. To the point where some of the narrations, they state that Banu Abbas has come into power now. They themselves, as they rose up saying that they were going to give the right back to who? Banu Fatima. Khilafat is the right of Banu Fatima. They said that they were going to give this right back to Banu Fatima. But they never did. It came a point in time, Banu Abbas, they have power. What did they do? They burned the house of Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam. Why? Because they were afraid of the knowledge that was coming out of this house. They were afraid of the knowledge that was coming out of this house. The ignorant have always, or the people that were empowered that were ignorant, just to keep their power, what have they always done? They've always decided to keep the masses ignorant. Zalimeen, they've always done that. And you see that happening today also. You look at any zalim government. You look at Pakistan, for example. Look at Pakistan. What do I mean? The atrocities that the government has done to the Shias of that country, they've been kept quiet. They've been kept quiet. Like we talked about last week, Shahadat, teachers that were slaughtered, yet there wasn't a peep about that. And this has been the case throughout history. This is what tyrants have always done. But what was the case with Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam? Do you all know? It was only that they were afraid of the knowledge that he was spreading. The knowledge that Imam Sadiq al-Islam was spreading was not only knowledge that was going to benefit all of mankind, but it was going to take mankind out of their state of ignorance. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. It was going to take the people of that time out of their state of ignorance. And for a zalim government to have control of the people, they need the people to be ignorant. They need the people to be ignorant. Or else if they get educated, they realize, hey, hold on, this government, what they're doing is wrong. When they start thinking for themselves. And Imam Sadiq al-Islam, not only was he fighting against the sects that had started within Islam, the groups that had started within Islam, but he was also fighting against atheists. When I say fighting, I'm talking about intellectual battles. I'm not talking about physical jihad. He was fighting against the ideas of all these other groups that had sprouted up within Islam. He's fighting against just the majority of Muslims that don't even know what happened in the time of the Holy Prophet. He's fighting against atheism that sprouted its head again. All of these groups. He's fighting against the Zaydis. He's fighting against the people who said that Muhammad ibn Hanafiya is the Imam. He's fighting against people like Malik ibn Anas intellectually. He's fighting against people like who? Nu'man ibn Thabit, Abu Hanifa intellectually. So the Imam, he tried his best to make sure no stone was unturned when it came to letting the people know about the school of thought of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. He tried his best. There's a narration in Tafsir al-Ayashi, and Al-Burhan fi Tafsir al-Quran, he's also narrated this. When it came to the verse of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Holy Prophet, if he is killed or he is martyred, the companion of Imam Sadiq a.s, they asked him, does this mean that he didn't die a natural death? This idea that the Holy Prophet, he passed away a natural death, it exists today. And this idea existed at that time also. The Quran has specifically said, if he is killed or he is martyred. They asked him, does this mean that he didn't die a natural death? And the Imam, he says, yes, he was poisoned. He was poisoned. Poisoned by who? Poisoned by those two. He was poisoned by those two. The companions and Imam Sadiq a.s, they cursed them, they cursed their parents. This type of knowledge, Imam, he would only tell who? His closest and his most devout companions. And he would tell them not to make this am. When it came to showing his wilayat, he would show his most closest companions and he would tell them that you do not reveal my secret as long as I'm alive. You don't reveal these secrets. One of the companions of the Imam, he asked the Imam, Ya ibn Rasulullah, can you hold the sky in your hands? Can you hold the sky in your hands? This narration is Madinatul Ma'ajiz by Sayyid Hashim Bahrani. And the Imam, he looks at him and he says, not only can I hold the sky in my hand, but if you want, I can make the sky vanish. If you want, I can make the sky vanish. And the man, he says, Ya ibn Rasul, can you do it for me? Do it for me, please. And he says that as soon as I mention this, I see that he's tugging at the sky as if he was tugging at a beast. He's just tugging at the sky. He just makes this ishara, he just does this with his hands. I see that he's tugging at the sky as if he's tugging at a beast. And at that same time, the sky, it blackened, and it seemed like there was an eclipse. As soon as he did that, it seemed like it was an eclipse. And the man, he says, the people of Medina, they witnessed this. After this, the Imam, he put the sky back where it was. And he told his companion, what? Do not let the people know that it was me that did this. Don't let the people know. Do not tell the people. Why? Because the Imam himself, he says, Imam Jafar Sadiq, a lot of the ma'rifat of Imam that we have, when it comes to the narrations, they come from Imam Sadiq a.s. They come from Imam Jafar Sadiq a.s. What do I mean? The Imam himself, he says, look, our Shi'as, there's some of our Shi'as that if we divulge some of our secrets, they quickly go and they tell everyone. They quickly go and they tell everyone. And when they tell people, it's because they told people that they put themselves in trouble. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. It's because they go and tell people they put themselves in trouble. And then we have another group of our Shi'as that it doesn't matter what we tell them of our secrets, they keep it to themselves. They keep it to themselves. And there were some of the companions of Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, when the Imam, he showed them some of his secrets, they went and they told. And when they told the people, they put themselves in harm's way. Why? Because the government came after them. And there were some companions such as Jabir Jofi, who never divulged one single secret of the Imam as long as the Imam was alive. As long as the Imam was alive. These secrets of Imamat. But I'm not going to talk about these secrets of Imamat. Why? Because these secrets of just general knowledge that the Imam gave 1100 years ago, 1000 years ago, 900 years ago, that knowledge, we've come to realize that that was real knowledge. And the only way this personality could have that knowledge was if he was given that knowledge by a creator. If he was given that knowledge by a creator. And what is that knowledge? Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, he's giving a lecture. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Imam, he's giving a lecture. And while he's giving that lecture, there was an atheist who didn't believe in the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He comes and he sits in the lecture. When the Imam finishes his lecture, this person, he gets up and he says to him, isn't it true that there is no God? He says to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, isn't it true that there's no God? Isn't it true that you have made up this concept of God just so you can control the people? Just so you can control the people. And he goes on to say, Ya Jafar, me, I don't believe in a creator. I don't believe in a God. But I don't lie to people and say that there is a God. Why? You lie to them and you tell them that there is a God so you can benefit from them. So you can gain wealth from them. So you can gain prestige from them. So you can gain the worldly benefits from them. Whereas me, I don't believe that there is a creator. I believe that this universe came into existence by itself. By itself. The Imam, he looks at him, his name was Abu Shakir, and he just waits until he's finished with his rant. When he finally finishes his rant, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he looks at Abu Shakir and he goes, Abu Shakir, you say that I only believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so I can gain money from the people. You say that I only believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so I can gain wealth from the people, so that I can gain prestige from the people. If it was truly wealth that I wanted, I could have done anything other than be in this masjid and teach. I could have done anything. Abu Shakir, you and your father, Abu Shakir, he used to make idols. He goes, Abu Shakir, you and your father, you know about gems and you know about stones. Isn't that correct? He goes, yes, that's correct. And he goes, Abu Shakir, if I wanted wealth, I know exactly what type of gems can be found where, and I know how much they can be sold for in different parts of the world. If I wanted wealth, I could have gotten those gems, I could have gotten those rocks, and I could have sold those rocks if I wanted to. Abu Shakir, do you know how much you know about your own working? Do you know, for example, where these rocks come from that you're able to make these idols from? He goes, no. He goes, Abu Shakir, these gems, do you know that a diamond can only be cut by a diamond? No, I don't know that. Abu Shakir, do you know where these rocks that you make your idols from, do you know how they even came into existence? No, I don't. Abu Shakir, you say that there's no God. You say there's no God. And you say that I've made up God. Tell me, this mountain that you see, did it exist before you saw it, or did it exist after you saw it? This mountain. He goes, no, the mountain, it existed before. So you looking at that mountain, you imagining that mountain did not bring that mountain into existence. It existed before you. Isn't that correct? Yes, that's correct. So me speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not bring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into existence. He was there before I even spoke about him. Before I spoke about him. Abu Shakir, he goes, how can it be that this God that you talk about, he's so big, he's so wide, he's so expansive that we can't see him? How is it that we can't see him? I refuse to believe that someone that big is not able to be seen by the eyes. The Imam, he says, Abu Shakir, have you seen the wind? He goes, no, I've not seen the wind, but I feel it when it moves. I haven't seen the wind, but I feel it when it moves. The Imam, he says, well, when it doesn't move, does that mean that the wind doesn't exist? When it doesn't move, does that mean that the wind doesn't exist? And he stays quiet. He stays quiet. Imam, he takes some pebbles in his hands and he says, Abu Shakir, you have no knowledge about the workings of this universe. That's why you've come to the conclusion that a God does not exist. If you truly knew about this universe, you wouldn't say that. Let me ask you a question. This body that you have, does it have a control center? This body that you have, does it have a control center? The movements that you make from your body, are they controlled by something? He goes, yes, they are. What controls your body? The brain. So everything that you do is controlled by the brain? He goes, yes, everything that I do is controlled by the brain. Then he goes, how can this small body have a control center, but this universe not have someone controlling it? He says to Abu Shakir, how can this universe that you claim not have someone that's controlling it? He stays quiet. Then he says to him, Abu Shakir, you don't believe in God because you're ignorant. If you were truly a scientist, you wouldn't say what you're saying. Because a scientist, they believe in a creator or they believe in a creative force. A true scientist either believes in a creator or a force that's created everything. A scientist. A creator. In Arabic, that creator is known as? In Arabic, what's that creator known as? The creator of all creation. Allah. In Arabic, he's known as Allah. In English, we call him God. In Farsi and Urdu, we call him Khuda. Right? Different languages, but the person that we're talking about is one and the same. One and the same. What do I mean? Arabic, you call an apple what? Tufaha. In English, you call an apple an apple. In Farsi, what do you call an apple? Sib. In Urdu, you call it? Sib. The reality of that object is the same. It doesn't matter what language we're speaking about that object in. He goes, that reality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that it's exactly the same. It doesn't matter if you use God, if you use Allah, if you use Khuda. And he goes, Abu Shakir, you're not a scientist. You're ignorant. That's why you don't know the workings of this universe. If you just knew the inner workings of your own body, you wouldn't say what you say. If you just knew. He says to him, do you know that the blood inside your body, it moves? He goes, no, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. He goes, Abu Shakir, do you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created such creatures inside your body? They are born inside your body and they die inside your body. And it's because of these creatures you're alive? The number of these creatures is more than the grains of sand that exist. Abu Shakir didn't know what he was talking about. But today, because of science, we can conclude that the Imam was talking about what? Cells. Cells. This is exactly what cells do, whether it be white blood cells or red blood cells. What do? They're born inside your body, they die inside your body. The white blood cells, they protect you. They're the ones that make sure that you become well. The red blood cells, what do? They're the ones that take the oxygen throughout your whole body. Imam is talking about cells when? 1,000 years before they were even discovered. 1,000 years before. Imam, he picks up a pebble and he says, Abu Shakir, you think that this pebble is not moving, but there's swift motion in this pebble that you don't see. There's motion in this pebble that you don't see. He goes, Abu Shakir, there isn't anything that exists in this universe that is still. Everything is constantly in motion. Everything. What is it that is in motion in that pebble? Molecules or atoms are constantly in motion. But the Imam, he goes on to say, look, Abu Shakir, even though this looks like it's motionless, you don't realize that the earth is moving. You don't realize that the earth is moving. If this earth were to stop, that pebble would continue to move. Just like a car accident, if a car is going 100 miles an hour and you don't have your seatbelt on, the car will stop when you get into a crash, but your body will not. Your body will continue to move. And the Imam, he's telling Abu Shakir the same thing, that you don't see the swift moveness in this. Abu Shakir, do you know how these rocks came to wherever you picked them up from? There was a point in time when these rocks weren't solid. These rocks were liquid. There was a point in time when these rocks were liquid. Over time, they became solid. When Abu Shakir heard this, he starts to laugh at the Imam. And when he laughs, the Imam, he says, why are you laughing? And he goes, because you just said that these rocks were water. Look at the mentality, or look at the mental capacity. When Abu Shakir says that you said that these rocks were water, Imam, he says, I didn't say that the rocks were water. All I said was that the rocks were liquid. Abu Shakir, don't you even know the difference between liquid and water? Milk is liquid, but it's not water. Vinegar is liquid, but it's not water. Oil is liquid, but it's not water. Do you not know the difference between the two? He stays quiet. He goes, I'll test it when I go home. I'll heat it up and see if it turns into liquid. And the Imam, he says, Abu Shakir, you can't burn it in your furnace at home. To turn it into liquid, you need a high temperature, and you can't achieve that at home. You can't achieve that at home. Abu Shakir, there was a time when the whole earth was what? In a liquid state. The land was in a liquid state. And what happened over time? It solidified. When you look at astronomy, what do they say? When this earth was created, it went through phases, and one of the phases was what? That this earth was in a very hot state. The land masses that we have, they came into existence through what? Through what? Do you all know? Volcanic eruptions and lava. That's how they say that these land masses that we have came into existence. Abu Shakir, when he was told this, he didn't know what Imam was talking about. The Imam, he told Abu Shakir about how this world came into existence when 1,000 years before we even found out. The Imam, he looked at Abu Shakir and he says, Abu Shakir, this sun, you don't understand that there are stars that are way brighter than the sun. There are stars that are bigger than the sun. Brighter and bigger than the sun. In comparing those stars to this sun looks insignificant. And just recently, in the last, 50 years, I want to say 100 years, we find out about what? All these different types of stars, for example, like quasars. We find out about all these stars that are brighter than the sun. We find out about stars that are bigger than the sun. Imam told us about these when? 1,000 years before the Westerners even knew about it. The Imam, he's talking about how this world is constantly moving. When did we find out that the world was rotating? A couple of 100 years ago. The Imam is talking about how this world is revolving. When did we find out that the world is revolving? A couple of 100 years ago. The Imam, he talks to Abu Shakir. He says, Abu Shakir, you don't believe in a God. Can you tell me, if you were to plant a seed, would it sprout into whatever fruit or whatever tree it needs to sprout into? He goes, yes. He goes, can it sprout by itself without the aid of anything else? And he goes, no. He goes, Abu Shakir, do you not know that this seed that you put in the soil, it needs water? Do you know how this water comes over onto the seed? He goes, no. The water cycle that we learned in school, Imam Jafar Sadiq a.s. tells us about it 1,000 years ago. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The Imam, he tells us about this. The Imam, when he's talking about the theory of light, what does he say? He says, the reason we're able to see objects the way we see them is not that there's light coming from the eyes and hitting the object. No, there's light. He says that there's light being reflected from the object, and that light is hitting our eyes. That light is hitting our eyes. And the Imam, he says, if someone makes an instrument where all of that light gets condensed into a little piece, they would be able to see something that is 300 feet away as if it's 30 feet away. They'd be able to see something that is 300 feet away as if it's 30 feet away. And Galileo, when he made his telescope, what does he say? When they asked him, how is it that this telescope that you made is able to see the mountains on the moons and is able to see all those other stars? What does he say? He says the same exact thing. He says that what this does is it captures the light into this lens. And because of that, we're able to see something that is that far away as if it's right near us. The sad part is that Imam Sadiq a.s. did not get credit for this theory. He didn't get credit for the theory. When it came to chemistry, Jabir ibn Hayyan, he became famous, even amongst the Western scholars. But Imam Jafar Sadiq a.s. did not become famous. Even though Jabir, he used to say that my master, I learned from my master Jafar Al Sadiq. I learned from my master Jafar Al Sadiq. This is what the Imam gave. This knowledge that we had over 1,000 years before the West had it. Yet what did the Muslims do to this knowledge? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. I know some people are looking at their watches. I'm going to end it, don't worry. It's not that late. So I will end it soon. But what did the Muslims do to this knowledge? Absolutely nothing. This knowledge was coming from this source. What did the Muslims do? Instead of letting this source, this fountain of knowledge spread, they decided to stop it. They decided to stop it. Why? Because they were afraid of what was going to happen. The way or the life of Imam Sadiq a.s, the way that his house burnt down because of the tyrants of his time, you see that there's no difference between that and the way the tyrant of his time burnt down the house of his great-grandmother, Lady Zahra. You see that there's no difference in the way that the tyrant of his time burnt the tents of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulallah. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallallahu alayka ya Sadiq Fatima. Sallallahu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtabah. Sallallahu alayka ya Gharib al-Ghuraba. Ya Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Brothers and sisters, it's the last moments of Imam Jafar Sadiq a.s. life. And before he passes away, he writes his will. And in his will, because of the tyrant of his time, he had ordered whoever was to represent Imam Sadiq a.s. for his will. The tyrant of his time, Mansur, he had told the governor of Medina that that person should immediately be killed. And because Imam Sadiq a.s. knew this, in his will, he says that there will be 4 people that are able or that should be able to carry out my will. And of those 4 people, he names who? He names Mansur. Of those 4 people, he names the governor of Medina. Of those 4 people, he names one of his sons. And of those 4 people, he names Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam. And because he had named these 4 people, the governor of Medina, he couldn't kill any one of them, because then people would ask, why did you kill these 2 and not those 2? And the Khalifa himself, he had said what? That I want you to kill whoever he named. So the governor couldn't do anything. It's the last moments of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam's life, and he's resting his head on the knees of Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam, and he is crying. And when he's crying, Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam, he asks his father, "Oh father, why are you crying?" Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, he cries and he says, "Oh my son, I'm crying over what will happen to you." He says, "Oh my son, at least yet you're here with me. Oh my son, at least my head is resting on your knees. Oh my son, when you will be martyred, when you will go through the same thing that I'm going through, you will be far away from this land. Your son will be far away from you." Brothers and sisters, this was the life of who? Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. His head is resting on the knees of his son. Come, let us look at the life of Imam Zayn al-Abidin and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. When Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he's not in Kufa, Lady Zainab, she yells out, Ya Abati Adrikni. When she yells that out, Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he comes through the gates of Kufa and he says to his auntie, "Oh auntie dear, I went to go bury my father Hussein." When he says this, Lady Zainab, she asks Imam Zayn al-Abidin, "Ya Sayyid Sajjad, how were you able to bury my brother?" He says, "Oh auntie dear, when I went there were some women of the Banu Asad clan, they were crying, and when they saw me come, and they started to run away. And when they were running away, I said to them, 'Oh my ladies, oh my sisters, please wait. I am this person's son. I am Ali and this is Hussein.' When I say this, those women, they start to cry and they start to wail and they say, 'Wallah, this is definitely Hussein.' And I asked them, 'How do you know that this is Hussein?' The only way that you can tell an individual is by their face. My father doesn't have his head with him.' And they say, 'Ya Ali, for 3 nights now, whenever we come by this corpse, we hear the voice of a woman who keeps saying, Ya Hussein.' When they say this, they leave. And Lady Zainab, she says, oh my nephew, how did you bury my brother?" And that's when Sayyid Sajjad, he says, "Oh auntie dear, it was very difficult for me. After I dug up the grave, I tried to put the body into the grave, but I realized that there was no one to take that body. Then when I get into the grave and when I look up and I realize that there is no one to give me that body, when this happened, I turn towards Kufa, I turn towards Najaf, and I say, Ya Jaddi Adrikni.
Oh, grandfather dear, please help me. As soon as I said this, oh, auntie dear, there were two arms that raised up from the grave. Yes, Sayyid Sajjad, were those the arms of my father, Amir al-Mu'mineen? Oh, auntie dear, no, they were the arms of my grandmother, Zahra.
Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Walla'natullahi ala qawmi az-zalimin. Matam Hussein.
Ya Hussein, 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 and Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. یہ علم و ہدایت کا دیا کس نے بجھایا؟ یہ علم و ہدایت کا دیا کس نے بجھایا؟ یہ علم و ہدایت کا دیا کس نے بجھایا؟ یہ علم و ہدایت کا دیا کس نے بجھایا؟ بیٹے پہ محمد کے، بیٹے پہ محمد کے کوئی رحم نہ کھایا۔ یہ علم ہدایت کا دیا کس نے بجھایا؟ یہ علم ہدایت کا دیا کس نے بجھایا؟ جعفر صادق کا ڈلی رات جلایا، کر جعفر
ہدایت کا دیا کس نے بجھایا، یہ علم و ہدایت کا دیا کس نے بجھایا۔
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا حجة الله، السلام عليك يا رحمة للعالمين، السلام عليك يا باعث الهدى ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا سوق الدين، السلام عليك يا علي بن أبي طالب عليه السلام، السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا أبا محمد المجتبى عليه السلام، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين عليه السلام، السلام عليك يا مظلوم كربلاء، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد المسيحيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا مولانا أبو الفضل العباس عليه السلام، السلام عليك يا قمر بني هاشم، السلام عليك يا عبد الصالمتي لله ورسوله، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا ابو الفضل عباس علیہ السلام. السلام علیکہ یا محمد ابن علی علیہ السلام. السلام علیکہ جعفر ابن محمد علیہ السلام. السلام علیکہ یا موسیٰ ابن جعفر علیہ السلام. السلام علیکہ علی ابن موسیٰ علیہ السلام. السلام علیکہ یا مولانا غریب الغرباء. السلام علیکہ یا معین الضعفاء والفقراء. السلام علیکہ یا شمس الشموس انیس النفوس جو المدفون بأرض الطوس. السلام علیکہ محمد ابن علی علیہ السلام. السلام علیکہ علی ابن محمد علیہ السلام. السلام علیکہ حسن ابن علی علیہ السلام. السلام علیکہ یا مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام علیکہ یا خلیفۃ الرحمن. السلام علیکہ یا شریک القرآن. السلام علیکہ یا امام الانس والجان. اجل اللہ تعالی فرجک وسأل اللہ تعالی مخرجک وظہورک ورحمت اللہ وبرکاتہ. اللہم صل علی محمد وآل محمد. اللہم کل ولیک الحجت ابن الحسن صلواتک علیہ وعلی ابویہ فی هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
مار لعنت، مار بکر لعنت.